Something has been holding the Sonic franchise back, limiting its potential to be a great franchise and instead stagnating to where it is now, which is still a pretty good one. But Sonic deserves so much better, and with this year being the franchise's 35th anniversary, the problem has only become more glaring despite there being a simple fix. See, Sonic has a massive problem when it comes to the villain department. Outside of Eggman and Metal Sonic, there aren't any villains in his rogues gallery that are instantly recognizable for being great antagonists. And what I mean by this is Sonic lacks any villains who have depth outside of a singular appearance. This series has come a long way, and it's evolved beyond just being entertaining video games. It's shows, movies, and comics. Yet despite all these forms of medium, the only memorable villain after 35 years of existence is a fat, bald, middle-aged man. Now, I can already hear the typing because those of us who are a little more invested in the franchise might like characters like Mephiles or Chaos, or perhaps even Dr. Starline, but none of those are characters that were enabled to make a lasting impact on the franchise. It's as if Sega is too scared to take a chance on any other villain aside from Eggman, and by not doing so, they might be damaging the franchise in the long run. As one of the most recent games, I think Sonic Superstars highlights a major flaw when it comes to Sonic villains. Oftentimes, it's not apparent what the antagonist's ambitions or motives are. While Fang and Eggman service the story well enough, the true endgame villain is revealed after completing Trip's campaign, and it's none other than the Black Dragon who was teased during the Trio of Troubleshort. If you're asking yourself, who? You're not alone, as his inclusion feels like he was randomly shoehorned in at the very last second to heighten the stakes, but it ultimately cheapens the experience as it feels wholly disconnected from the story. Where did he come from? Who is he? Why is he attacking the North Star Islands? These questions go entirely unanswered, and while I do find enjoyment in theorizing about such things, it doesn't excuse the lack of explanation. Despite the Black Dragon's menacing design, he becomes such a forgettable part of the game due to his rushed implementation, given that he also shares the antagonist role alongside Eggman and Fang, who both feel as though they have a believable in-universe reason to be fighting Sonic and his friends, not just, oh, there needs to be a big boss at the end. It doesn't help his memorability. Having multiple antagonists isn't necessarily a problem to begin with, but it becomes one when a villain's presence begins to overshadow the others. For instance, Resident Evil 4 is a great example of facing multiple antagonists, with each one being memorable and not overshadowing each other. Each boss feels unique in personality, location, and motivation. Some are working together while others are scheming behind the scenes. However, each enemy you encounter feels as though they are serving a unique purpose in their fight against you. Now, let's look at Far Cry 3, which is one of my favorite games of all time. When most people think about the villains of that game, one name comes to mind: Voss. He had so much character exuding from his performance that he ballooned to a point where most don't remember that he wasn't even the main enemy of the game. It was actually a guy named Hoyt Volker, but he was ultimately overshadowed by the now iconic encounters with Voss, making Hoyt an instantly forgettable villain. This problem of overshadowing other villains isn't a problem that's exclusive to Superstars, but it is one that's recurring in the franchise. Eggman is almost always a part of these games, whether he's the focal point or playing a supporting role. While I love the character and usually want to see what scheme he is cooking up, his constant inclusion detracts from any new villains being introduced alongside him. Understandably, most of these characters are created or used by Eggman to further his goals, but I do think that some of these characters could have benefited from Eggman either being excluded from the game entirely or making him less relevant to the plot, and here's why. Eggman is a great villain. He's Sonic's arch nemesis for a reason, but more than that, he's the antithesis to everything Sonic stands for. We know Sonic is about freedom, nature, and speed, while Eggman represents control, technology, and laziness. With how Eggman stands as a stark contrast to Sonic, it only makes sense that he's in a majority of the media. However, with Eggman being the defining villain in the franchise, there hasn't been a lot of room for others to make their mark, and instead they feel as if they're footnotes in Eggman's conquest. Just about every villain is connected to Eggman in some way. Infinite served under him, Mephiles was freed by him, Starline worshipped him, and I could go on much longer with the list, but I think you guys guys get the point. What this ultimately means is that no original villain is allowed to stand on their own, which is a disservice to the franchise because they will always be in the shadow of Eggman. Infinite showed promise. His design was menacing and mysterious. He had unparalleled power, but ultimately fell flat when it came to the depiction of his story. This poor character portrayal is only exacerbated by the fact that he was relegated to a backseat role because, of course, the main villain needed to be Eggman for some reason. Don't get me wrong, it's entertaining seeing Eggman finally conquer the world, but why not write a story around this new character and his shocking rise to power? Spending more time developing Infinite's story by omitting Eggman from the plot could have been an improvement on the game as a whole, and maybe would have left Sonic fans with a new villain to be excited about, rather than the one that they tried to forget. The Zeddy fare no better. In a game that should seemingly revolve around these mythic creatures from the Lost Hex, they are instead relegated to Eggman-controlled minions for a good portion of the runtime. Luckily, the comics were able to give agency to these characters when they sought revenge on Eggman, but I still question why the plot of that game needed to revolve around him instead of solely being about the Zeddy. We're already dealing with a huge cast of distinct villains, so the more prominence that they get, the more we understand their motivations and come to like the characters or even hate them in a good way. I can also imagine a version of Sonic 06 being received better if you removed Eggman from the game until the very end. This would keep the narrative focus on Mephiles and Iblis, while the hero's journey to stop these two from merging once again to become the all-powerful Solaris. Then, at the very end, the heroes would have to seek the aid of their old nemesis Eggman in order to save the day. But instead, Eggman is a persistent obstacle in the game, because it feels like the story team is too scared to make a game where he's removed from the plot and the full attention is on another villain. Even in a game like Sonic Frontiers, where Eggman isn't the central focus, he still has to be involved somehow, and this is actually my favorite Eggman appearance due to his dynamic with Sage. But it feels like taking a game to step away from him entirely and to let another villain shine would really benefit the series as a whole by making things feel fresh. Even if you look outside of the games and at the Sonic movies, all three films have Jim Carrey's Robotnik center stage as the villain, with a minor twist of his redemption in the third. And now it seems like he will possibly return in the fourth alongside Metal Sonic as a villain again. At times, his inclusion starts to feel so forced that other characters become less and less noticeable. And once you start to view it from that perspective, you begin to realize just how few good villains there really are. Unfortunately, when it comes to interesting villains that would be able to carry a game on their own, many of them have already been defeated in a way that would make it hard for them to return or have ultimately been killed off. Characters that come to mind are the likes of Starline, who was so interesting for his capability to recognize that Eggman and Sonic were stuck in a never-ending battle, which he deemed the Sonic cycle. Starline wanted to not only impress Eggman, but surpass him in every way, but it seems as though he met his demise. However, the jury is still out on that one. Mimic as well was a very intriguing character from the comics, seen as he was a shapeshifter who betrayed his team, which led to their deaths. He was pretty compelling as a lone wolf who hated other villains and heroes alike. The only problem with his character is that he was a coward, akin to that of General Grievous from the Clone Wars series, but the character was still fun before he seemingly died. I don't know if he necessarily could pull the weight of being the main title villain, but perhaps for a spin-off game. Another character I believe people would want to see as a main villain is Mephiles. He did the unbelievable and escaped Sonic 06 purgatory, but his time in the sun was fleeting, as Shadow easily defeated him and he was once again lost to time and space. A lot of characters that are still around aren't really major threats to Sonic. Rough and Tumble bumble around like a pair of idiots. They're fun additions to the villain roster, don't get me wrong, but they'll never be more than henchmen. Crutch, the last time we saw him, has become a victim of Eggman, once more adding to the fact that every villain, of course, has to have some dynamic or encounter with him. Surge and Kit could be great villains to introduce in a game or show, seen as they're like twisted dark dark versions of Sonic and Tails, but they almost seem to be on the path of redemption. Who knows how smoothly that will go? It could end up flipping on its head and they become more evil than before. But a lot of Sonic's villains wind up becoming his allies, which is something that I do enjoy, but when the writers aren't introducing cool new villains at a pace to match, we start to dwindle on intriguing foes for the blue blur. And this leads us to another problem that I didn't even notice until a comment brought it to my attention. A lot of the new villains being introduced recently are all thieves. There are so many different archetypes for villains, yet Valdis, Enigma, Lunar, whoever the thief is in the Chaotix case files is revealed to be, they're all thieves. For the stories to stay fresh, the villains and their motives should theoretically be more diverse, so that every story isn't just Sonic and his friends need to stop X person from stealing Y item. We should be getting villains aside from Eggman who mentally want to break Sonic, or hold a grudge against Sonic for not being there when Eggman conquered the world during Sonic Forces. The state things are currently in just feels as if Eggman will forever be the character who is allowed to do cool things like summon eldritch horrors from another dimension or ancient gods beneath the Earth's crust. Let's get some new villains in on the action so that when they inevitably cross paths with our heroes again, it's a welcome surprise. I'm not the most well versed when it comes to Archie Sonic, but it seems like a lot of villains in that run were able to really hold their own weight when it came to being staple villains without needing to rely on Eggman propping them up. I really love and appreciate this series, and part of what makes it fun is all of the villains, but I do think it benefits the audience if we start getting fresh new villains who are as important as Eggman. I'm not saying toss Eggman aside, but who wants to see Superman only fight Lex Luthor, right? We need staple characters making the rounds and doing their own things. Clutch for a while was actually a good step in that direction for the comics. He was building his own criminal empire, and he clearly had a disdain for Eggman. It just felt cool seeing another villain coexist in that world, but obviously that didn't last. However, with exciting projects around the corner, who knows what's in store? I would love to hear what you guys think about the state of Sonic villains. I also want to mention again that if you enjoy movies and shows, join me over on Criticless. It's a free app/site that I've been using to review and catalog things that I watch. I've made a group over there for Sonic fans so we can review new Sonic shows and movies together. Once again, it's free, I'm not sponsored, it's just an app that I really enjoy, so I'll link it down below. Other than that, you can find me on X at Sonic Theory 96 and on my other channel, Sonic Theory Plus. I promise more content is coming there soon. I've just been really busy trying to get weekly content out here. Which reminds me, if you like the more regular uploads that you've been seeing recently, let me know in the comments below. As always, I want to wish you all the best. Take care. Peace.